how would you describe quiet firing?
Yeah, so it's definitely a rebrand. It's a rebrand of something that has been happening for a long time. And because it's associated with quiet quitting, they kind of gave it the quiet name.
So quiet.
So quiet quitting is when an employee does the bare minimum to not get fired. Well, this quiet firing is on the leader's side. So it is doing the bare minimum to support a team member with the hopes that they're actually going to leave. So this is when, if you think about a boss, and I want to call them a boss because people who quiet fire are not leaders. A boss intentionally does things to make people's lives not great at work so that hopefully they make the decision to quit. So this has been around for a long time. And the best example comes from a movie that came out a long, long time ago, 1999, wow. Right? That was a long time ago. Office Space. And we still talk about that. And yes, it's an old movie, but one of the reasons that still gets talked about is because it highlighted so many of the negative things in culture and in corporate culture that really made people hate working in those environments. And the sad thing is, most of those things are still happening today. And one of those is quiet firing. So if you remember the character Milton.
Oh, epic character.
He was the guy who loved the stapler.
His red stapler.
Yes. Well, he basically gets quiet fired throughout the show. So in the film, the boss comes and the first thing they do is they move his cubicle from a window view to the interior. And then they move him 3 more times. And then they start storing boxes in his cubicle. And then they eventually move him to the basement. I think they stop paying him at one point, and it's not until the very end where they take away his prized possession of the red swing line stapler.
And boy, was that a mistake.
That was a mistake
because what happens?
He burns down the entire office building, which is terrible, right? But they instead of firing him, they just kept making his life more and more uncomfortable. So this has been around for a long time, but the reason we're talking about it now is it's happening more and more. We're seeing this in the Great Resignation. We just saw that there was a LinkedIn news poll that went out. And this wasn't something that we had 300 people respond to, right? This was something that had over 20,000 people respond to it. And 48% of people said that they've seen quiet firing in the office, and 35% say that they had it happen to them. So this is definitely not something new, but it is something that is contributing to the leadership crisis we have today.
Well, I'm kind of glad there's a spotlight on it because I hope it creates a new trend of great leadership coming out of this because that's the only solution to what's happening. And what you're describing here is just creating an unbearable workplace where there's a lot of poor leadership, a lot of spineless leadership, where people go, I'm just going to react to this in a passive-aggressive way because the employee is being passive-aggressive, the team member, and so I'm not going to lean into it. I'm not going to coach. I'm not going to rise up and be decisive. I'm just going to give them mundane tasks and make their life miserable until I hope they just one day decide, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to leave on my own volition.
Exactly.
This is a terrible way to live.
It is the worst kind of leadership. We call it spineless leadership. You said that. It's not taking responsibility for what a leader is supposed to do. And this can either be intentional or unintentional. There are things that happen, like passing people over for promotions and not letting them know why. Right? Never giving them a raise, cutting their hours. There are key things that people do intentionally to kind of signal you don't have a future here. But there's also things that people do in an unintentional way that may be sending a message that they are being quiet fired.
So this isn't always malicious. There's a lot of leaders out there who are going, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. Oh, gosh.
Exactly. And some of it is just because people get so busy, right? But you might be sending some of these signals, like if you start missing one-on-ones, right? You cancel meetings that you're not able to attend that the employee is setting up. Or maybe you even just don't reply to emails. You're just unavailable. Whenever they start seeing that my leader is not available to me, it signals that my leader doesn't care about me. And so they are going to then disengage. And so that means they're either going to quiet quit or they're going to real quit.
Yeah. And I mean, if this was a marriage, it would be like quiet divorcing. Yeah. If you just kept canceling date nights, you never connected with your spouse, everything was always more important than them, it's going to lead to a destruction in the relationship.
Exactly.
And I think that's what we're seeing in the workplace across the board. And when a boss chooses to quiet fire someone versus actually fire someone, on what's the heart behind that? Why don't they just step up and go, I got to let this person go?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different reasons. And let me first say, there's never a valid reason to quiet fire someone. Like, that is leadership at its worst. And any of the examples that I'll give as reasons why are not, hey, man, if that's me, I'll go ahead and do it. But some people feel that they're powerless, right? They feel like, oh, I can't actually fire this. That is somebody else's responsibility. So I just got to deal with this. Some people think, man, if I fire that person, then all of it's going to be on me. I'd rather have someone with a pulse. Or they think, I just don't want to have a hard conversation. Most of the reasons when there is a disconnect between a leader and a team member is often that there's some sort of issue. Maybe that person has a really bad attitude. Maybe they're doing something that is disruptive to the team, or maybe they're just not performing. Well, the role of the leader is to bring that person in and have a hard conversation. But nobody likes doing that. Hard conversations are called hard conversations for a reason, because they're difficult and they're not fun. And so people think, well, I could have this, or I could just disengage and maybe the problem will solve itself. And that we are 100% against that in any sort of the way.